This time I'm gonna turn it over to Brother Mike Garrett, and he's gonna bring the facilitation this morning.
Get all dressed up. Hey, here we go. Good morning.
Good morning.
It was brought up a couple of weeks ago that unless I speak, you guys will never get to know me. Unfortunately, what you don't know is once I start talking, it's hard to get me to shut up. So
Okay, we leave at 8 o'clock.
feel free to get
Keep
up.
talking.
Feel free to get up and walk out. So Pastor Boyd reached out and he said, "Hey, you need to get up there and give it a shot and talk to these fellows." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "You can do anything you want." He said, "We do outreach, we do testimony, we do different subjects. Your call." And when he said that, it occurred to me that I have never voiced my testimony. Ever. There's a couple reasons for that. Number one, wasn't comfortable in doing so in a church. There's certain things you don't talk about in a church. There's certain things you don't talk about in front of ladies. That would disqualify my testimony on both counts. And so I decided to use this opportunity, since we have a gathering of gentlemen, to do that. And I'll do my best to get through it. So hopefully it'll get me out there and get you guys to know me just a little bit better. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Mike Garrett. I work at a place called Arm Texas. I'm a facilities manager, a firearms instructor, a combat instructor. I'm a professional shooter. I've been called a gun dealer. This is what I do for a living. I'm also an honorary deacon here at St. Paul in pastoral support. I speak whenever I'm asked to. I lead Sunday school when I'm invited to, and every time the pastor gives me an opportunity to, I take advantage of it, do Bible study, things like that. Kind of a odd combination, you might think, right? That's okay. So the question is, when you give your testimony, what can you tell people that will both glorify the path that you've traveled and give others an opportunity to see Him in you? So how did I get here? Born in 1967, put up for adoption, was adopted, and the night that I came home from the hospital, we left town. Never knew why. Of the 3 children my father adopted, I was the only one that had absolutely no framework, no knowledge. No one ever told me where I came from. No one gave me any details, nothing. More on that later. I grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas, and Deep South Louisiana. Moved from Lafayette, Baton Rouge, La Place, and I spent a little over 20 years down there. My grandfather used to call me his Texan with Cajun seasoning. I was born in Fort Worth, and so he had a lot of fun with that. But as my dad progressed through his career, he originally started working for Zales Jewelers in downtown Fort Worth, and then he became the credit manager for Montgomery Wards. He took over their credit card program and developed that. He went to work for a bank called Fidelity National Bank, which was eventually bought out by Hibernia, and he became the credit card processing senior vice president for Hibernia, and ended up processing somewhere in the neighborhood of about $4.5 billion worth of credit cards a year. So he worked up to his career, and as he worked up to his career, we moved across Louisiana to different places. I was a little bit of a weird kid. I I recognize that, and I don't have any issue with that. I really don't, you know, I was always kind of a small, slight kid. When I graduated, I was about 150 pounds total. Yeah. It was made even worse by the fact that I was very good at school. And so they promoted me. They didn't leave me in the grades that I was in, so I didn't get to do second grade. I didn't get to do fourth grade. And so I was always younger than the other kids. Consequently, I was always the last one picked for sports. I was always the last one picked for anything athletic. And so I chose a different sport. And that'll become relevant here. I chose a different sport when I got old enough and got eligible for it. I joined the rifle team. It's the only thing I could do. I'd get killed out on the football field. I wasn't worth a darn at softball, and basketball was out of the question. And so I joined the rifle team. But before that, as I grew up, my grandmother became a very, very deep influence on my life. She came to live with us when I was 9 years old. She's from Fort Worth, and she came to live with us in Baton Rouge. And she was a Christian Science practitioner. You guys aren't familiar with that. I'll describe it very, very quickly. A Christian Scientist is someone who follows the teachings of Mary Baker Eddy. They're extremely analytical. They're very analyzing when it comes to Bible verses. They do not believe that hell, as you would think of it, exists. They don't believe in medical treatment. They believe that you are in Satan's plane here on earth. It is a very complex belief in theology. But my grandmother was a practitioner. So from the time I was 9 to the time I was 13, she lived with us, 14, she lived with us. And every day we would study the Bible. She spent the entire day on the phone with people, because if you got sick and you were a Christian Scientist, you called a practitioner. They were like deacons, they were like pastors, and they would pray with you. And that's what she did, all day, every day. Phone never stopped ringing. And in her downtimes, she would call us in and she would ask us to read the Bible with her and to talk about it. And so for 5 years, that's what we got. My sister, a little bit older than me, she resisted that, and she went outside and she stayed away from it. I didn't, because I was fascinated with it. Something I always wanted to know, always wanted to learn. And it spoke to me. My parents didn't attend church very much. They were CNEs. That's the best way to say that, Christian. But they were Christmas and Easter type of Christians. Christian Science Church didn't have many kids in it. Imagine that. And so they thought I needed a youth group, so they decided to send me over to a local church, Baptist church, that was there in Baton Rouge, and get me involved in the youth group, because there were 40, 50, maybe more. And went to summer camp. Now, my grandmother had been working on me since I was 9, and along comes summer camp. And at summer camp, one of the counselors and I were chatting, and I made the decision to accept Christ. And when I did so, it was very exciting. Very, very exciting. And I was told afterwards, if you have any questions, come see us. And so I did, because my question is, where do we go from here, right? Went over to the counselor's rooms, and that's when I found out that not everything that goes on at summer camp, Christian summer camp, is Christian. I decided not to ask any questions and to pursue it in other places. And so I came home and I told my dad that I'd been baptized. I've never seen my father that angry. My father's stance on it, and it didn't occur to me till later, that the theology difference between the two religions was so different. He scolded me for joining another church. He did not see it as salvation. And I didn't understand that at that time. I didn't understand how a person could not see that as accepting Christ. So I decided to kind of back off on it. Still believed it. Still wanted to hear it. Still wanted to know more. And that light was there and it was burning, but it was tough. It was tough. And I withdrew from it a little bit. And when my grandmother left us and moved to a nursing home, it stopped. There was no development, none whatsoever. Didn't grow in Christ at all. Until I met my first wife. And when I met my first wife, she was very involved in church, in religion, in LaPlace, Louisiana. And we began to go back to church a bit. Got married in the church. Wanting to continue to investigate and find out. It was a bad path. Turned out, and I hate to say things like this, but it's part of the testimony, really is. It turned out the reason she was going to church was because the assistant pastor was her ex-boyfriend. And it didn't work out. Married Miss Kitten about a year and a half later. Came back to East Texas, found Miss Kitten, my wife. We've been married now for 30 years. Right at 30 years. She'd be mad at me if I didn't give you the exact year. It's all right. BJ, don't you dare tell her. But we're coming up on 30 years.
Does she not count the dating days in front of it?
Sir, she counts every single day. My wife will tell you that being married to me for this long has been like 5 minutes have gone by. Underwater. Trust me, she counts every minute. But I was always drawn back to church. Always drawn back to church. And I just didn't go. Just didn't go. So I started my career, I started working, and when I started working, I was always in the same thing. I was in operations management. I worked for restaurant companies, I worked for retail companies. Kind of settled in operations. That was my thing. I was the guy when the rubber hit the road. And when Miss Kitten got pregnant, we decided we needed to be back here. She decided we needed to be back here, so we came back here to East Texas. And when we came back to East Texas, one of the things that I did was underestimate the job market badly. And I couldn't find a job doing what I was doing and good at, so I went to work for a convenience store company. And I worked my way up. I just took anything I could get. I took an assistant manager's position in a convenience store. And I worked my way up from assistant manager to operations manager there. And I got a call one day. And that phone call was, "Hey Mike, we have an opportunity for you. We want you to travel. And we want you to work in our repossessions department, which doesn't exist. You're going to develop it. But we've been told that there are 4 stores in Dallas, and we want you to go get them for us. We want you to verify the assets. We want you to fire all the people. And we want you to turn those stores around, start them over again, bring them up to brand standards." And I thought, man, what a challenge. Let's be nice. And I did. And I took those 4 stores. And after those 4 stores came 3 or 4 more. And I found I had a talent for it. I did. I was the guy that would walk in and tell them, you've got 30 seconds, grab what you want. This is mine. And I'd put them on the street.
What kind of stores?
Sir, I worked for all of the major oil companies. I worked for mostly convenience stores. We worked in convenience stores, we worked in grocery stores, we worked in bars, nightclubs, a few gentlemen's clubs, things like that. So I did this and I got better and better and better at it. And they started utilizing me for the more difficult transitions because there's a couple of different ways that goes. When you walk in, they're either really happy to see you, please take this albatross. They're either very upset, but accepting because they've received a judicial order or something along those lines. Or they're not happy at all. They started sending me the ones where they were not happy at all. That started me down a path, a very dark path. I became non-empathetic, I became non-caring, I became, the best way to put that in a framework that will relay well is I became very self-driven and narcissistic. They called me and they asked me to go to Houston. I'll give you a good example. I'll give you a few good examples. They called me and they asked me to go to Houston. So I showed up at this convenience store in Houston. And they told me it would be a difficult transition. And I said, okay. I got my team together and there were about 3 of us that walked through the door. We had officers on civil standby, which is when you call them and say, hey, we expect problems. Please come and sit in the parking lot in case we need you real quick. So I walked into the convenience store. The gentleman that I was there to see was walking across the floor from right to left. And when I walked in, he saw me. And I handed him the packet of paperwork that I was required to hand him. And I told him, you need to leave. Don't know why I didn't give him his 30 seconds. Something told me not to. Told him you need to leave. And he said, I need to gather my things out of the office. And I said, you're not going anywhere near the office. He said, I need to get my things. And I said, it's not gonna happen, pal. It's not. Just head out the door. He began to walk toward the office. I stepped in front of him. Things got violent. As it turns out, there was a double-barrel shotgun strung to the back of the door. There was $241,000 in loose bills in the office. We couldn't figure out why. Why did this guy have all that money and wasn't paying his bills? So we cleared the store out and we began the asset transition, verifying everything that was there. And there was nobody in the store but us. And then a lady came walking out of the cooler. Ma'am, where'd you come from? She said, can I go? Sure, where'd you come from? I just need to go. Okay, so she left. We went, we looked, there was nothing but a walk-in cooler. It was just a massive walk-in cooler with drinks all along the back wall and there was nothing there. Because she was in the cooler hiding the whole time. That's what we came up with. About 10 minutes later, somebody else came walking out. And we went, So we went back in and we started investigating the cooler, and what we found was one of the racks that all the drinks and everything were kept on was screwed to a false door.
No way.
Oh yeah. We pulled it open, and there was an entire casino where there were about 30 people still enjoying themselves in the back of this building. We had walked all the way around this building, and we knew that it was much larger, but we couldn't figure out how to get into it. I have pictures of it if you want to see them. It was set up really nicely. The gentleman was running an illegal casino out of this convenience store. All the money was going to illicit needs. We seized all of it. If you've ever tried to get rid of non-registered slot machines in the state of Texas, I will tell you that it is extremely difficult. From there, I got a call to go to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. I went to Myrtle Beach. We took over a convenience store, a sandwich shop, and a gentleman's club. All three of them. And the staff that was working there, they were working in all three locations. And the young ladies, who were primarily Russian, would work in the gentleman's club at night. When they got off, they would either go to the convenience store or they would go to the sandwich shop. We fired all of them. Obviously, and they couldn't go back to work for us. It became evident to us later that it was a human trafficking operation. From there, I went to Miami, where Shell Oil Company had called us, and they were losing a little over $250,000 a month in fuel in one of their franchises. Do y'all remember when Bank of America lost all their credit card numbers? And I was in the middle of that. Haitians and Cubans had gotten those credit card numbers. The Haitians would come in on second shift, and they would use the credit cards and open the pumps up. And they would stand there and do a full service thing. And people would line up. And you'd give them 20 bucks in cash, and they'd fill your tank with a bad credit card. We cleaned that out. From there, I went to Orlando. The Cubans had a whole different take on it. They had trucks that were literally set up like the Florida Department of Transportation trucks. They had vests, they had hats, the whole thing. Their trucks were really uniquely designed. They had fuel bladders in the back of them, and they could hold about 600 gallons.
Talking pickup truck.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, I will. They could hold about 600 gallons of fuel. So they would pull up, they would authorize the pump with those cards. And they would fill it. And they would drive it back down to Miami where the fuel was collected, and then they would ship it to Cuba. Cool operation. We had a hard time catching them because who's gonna question a Florida DOT worker that's filling up their truck every night after their shift? They would go from station to station to station to station. And when they were full, they would take it back to the collection point. It was a good experience for later on. It's a good learning experience for me, because I've never seen anything like that before. Unfortunately, when you live this type of lifestyle and you're immersed in this type of stuff, it tends to drag you down in. You start seeing the dark side of everything. You start looking at things completely differently. Everywhere I went, I saw the opportunity for theft, for abuse, for the horrors that people would put on each other. And that became my mindset. I started looking for it everywhere, and I saw it. I saw it. And so my typical schedule in those days was to fly in on the red eye, go ruin someone's life, do asset verification in the afternoon, take the oil company guys out, party till 1 or 2 in the morning, hit the sheets in a hotel, get up and do it again tomorrow. It became very, very difficult to sustain that type of lifestyle over the course of 15 years. But I did it over and over and over. And the deeper I got into it, the worse the contracts became. Sorry about what I'm gonna say. There's no other way than to describe this to you and the depths to which I sank than to say these things. I saw it all of it. Picked up dead cashier in Baton Rouge. First person on the scene when there was a drive-by shooting in Kansas City, and the guy managed to crawl from his car to the front door. I was the person they called to respond to a store in Eagle Pass when a boyfriend got angry with his girlfriend and killed her in the convenience store. Responded to more robberies, drive-bys, investigated constant thefts. I became the guy they always use for the darkest and roughest situations. Seen it all. What I'm going to tell you is not political. What I'm going to tell you is reality. I don't want you to take this any way other than the way I say it. When you see the debates about what is going on at the border, you are not being told anything. Anything. I've seen the bodies hanging from the bridges. Sorry. Been shot at, stabbed. Been tough. Excuse me. Been in more fights than I even want to admit to. Not the playground stuff. Not the one where you walk away with a bloody nose. And the ones where you go away in a truck. I even watched as one of my managers decided to get rid of the homeless people in front of her store in New Orleans. She connected a 1.5 inch high pressure hose because they could live on the sidewalks there. And I watched her use that hose and blow them right out into the street because the client wanted the property clean. I thought I'd seen it all. sent me to Detroit. If you have not been to Detroit, don't go. I was given 3 stations to take over up there. One was Shelby, Romeo, and a station on the corner of Mack and Alter. The station on the corner of Mack and Alter was beautiful, absolutely gorgeous, $5 million investment, just beautiful. Everything around it was an absolute wasteland. People evicted from their houses, just trying to get by. Talk about a hood. We had an employee that was arrested in that store. That may not sound unusual, but let me tell you what she was arrested for. There was a young lady that was working for her. There were 3 or 4 girls that came up and decided that she had offended them because the boyfriend that she had gotten pregnant by used to belong to one of them. A fight commenced, and there is a pregnant lady who worked for us who is being drugged all over that store. The manager called the police. Substation's right across the street. Took them about a half hour to get over there. When they got there, they informed her that she was never to call them again unless there was blood. They had way too much going on to be dealing with fights. Girl lost a baby. They came back that afternoon looking for her again. She called the police again because she called me and she asked me what to do. I said, I don't care what they say, call them. If there's a problem, you call them. She did. They put cuffs on her. So I went up and bailed her out. Detroit was unique. I'd never seen a piece of America like that before.
What was the charge?
Sir?
What was the charge?
Making a 911 call that was not needed. Not an emergency. Called a young lady, stayed with me for a long time, worked with me for a long time, called her Crazy Carol. She was great, just loved her to death. I could stick her in the absolute worst hole and she would come out shining like a rose and do everything that the company needed her to do. Because she'd been there and seen it. Wasn't scared of nothing. She was in my store in New Orleans when Katrina came through. And she's something else. She called me and said, y'all have rainstorms that I ain't never seen before. Yeah, we do. I then took over a store in Atlanta Park, Georgia. So I went from Detroit to Atlanta Park. Had to end up hiring an entire staff of Afghan freedom fighters to man that store. Nobody else could or would work there. It was that rough. It was that rough. And then they sent me to New Mexico. And that's the point of all of this. I'm not just telling you this to extol it. I got paid very well for what I did. Very well. New Mexico was my drawing card. Took over 2 truck stops on the border of New Mexico, and I've always been one of these fellows that, hey, you know, our rights are our rights. I couldn't believe that I had to stop and pull over and be inspected by the Border Patrol as I was driving along an interstate in the United States. I was. And as I got to the first truck stop, I thought, why the heck am I here? Wasn't that bad. It was in Deming, New Mexico. It's a nice little store, beautiful. And then I drove all the way across the state and I got to a place called Road Forks, New Mexico. And then I realized why I was there. Road Forks was the only thing in Road Forks, New Mexico, truck stop. The post office was located in the truck stop. There was a little convenience store in there. There was a restaurant. There were about 40 employees. There was the little clothing store was well stocked with Nikes and jerseys and all kinds of cool stuff. There was a knife store. There was a little survival store. The whole thing was run by one fellow who did absolutely nothing but sit in the front of the convenience store and give orders. And as I was given direction, I went in and I sat down with him and I told him, you're gonna have to let all your employees go. And he said, not gonna happen. Oh, it is. No, it's not. It will, and if I have to have you removed by force, I will. He gathered up all his people and he left. There are only about 50 people that live in the entire county that surrounds Road Forks, New Mexico. So we were a little short-staffed.
I'd say so.
He came back a couple of days later and the HR director said, yeah, you're kind of at an impasse here. You need to let him come back. I did. And as I was there, I started going through everything and looking at everything. And I apologize again for what I'm about to tell you. I walked back into the kitchen. No, thank you. I walked back into the kitchen one day. The restaurant was doing great business, which is amazing considering, again, there are only 50 people there. And I looked at some of the kitchen staff. They were very young. And so I went into the office and I pulled their personnel records, and the majority of them had been there 20, 25 years. Needless to say, those people were not the people that were on the personnel records and getting paid. So I questioned it. I was told to mind my own business. Doesn't work that way.
It is your business.
And I terminated the kitchen staff. Couldn't think of anything else to do. Obviously, there's 18 to 20-year-old girl been working there 25 years. That's not right. Can't provide me any documentation. Yeah, you can't work here anymore. And I watched them. And after I got rid of them, they didn't know where to go. Had no idea. And so I started asking questions and so forth. I'll make a long story short for you. The tires that were around the truck stop were drop points for the mules. They would come across the border, they'd walk through the desert, and they would drop their drugs in the tires. I tried to have the tires removed, nobody would let me. Nobody would pick them up. There wasn't a tire disposal company in southern New Mexico, they all knew, and they weren't about to cross that line. Couldn't get rid of them. The young ladies that were working in the kitchen had come across the border. They were being housed in the basement. They were being used in several ways. There was an upstairs in the truck stop. If you want to see it, Google Road Forks, New Mexico. You can see that thing. During the day, they would work in the kitchen. At night, they would stay underground if they weren't busy upstairs, taking care of the truckers. I got tired of it. I walked out. I threw diesel on the tires and I lit them on fire. Safety tip. If you don't want people mad enough at you to want you dead, don't burn their drug stations. I did. I had to leave New Mexico quick. I don't mind saying that now, because the truck stop is permanently closed. They've restored all the tires. Amazingly, they're not doing any business, but all the tires have showed back up. You can look at it on Google Earth, they're there. And they're back to business as usual. That was a very dark period for me. With Detroit, Atlanta, Baton Rouge, everything that I'd seen, let me tell you something, folks. I love our country. I do. I've been in the North Sea, been to the Caribbean, Canada, Mexico. I will tell you that you will see some of the absolute darkest places on the planet right here in this country. If you look. There are people out there who are simply fighting to survive every day. Those people are not typically the ones that we associate with in Mineola, Texas. But it's a whole different world. There are people that need your love and your outreach. I got to the point after New Mexico where I just said I couldn't do this anymore. Couldn't do it. I did a few more contracts. And my beautiful wife was in the kitchen one day, and now understand through this entire process, I haven't told you this I'm telling you this because I want to put you in that mindset and that framework so that you can understand where I was. I could not go home and talk to my wife. Couldn't go home and talk to people like this group. There was nowhere to go with it. And so I withdrew. I hardened the shell that was around me. And I became a different person. And I understand that. I had no sympathy, none whatsoever. I had no empathy. I had no ability to relate to other people because, quite honestly, I did not care. I became that hardened. But I couldn't do it anymore. And it destroyed my relationships with everyone. Luckily, the Lord placed me with somebody that would weather the storm. It was a storm. You don't live like that and not subject the ones that you have around you to hell. So I came home and I walked up behind this kid one day and I put my arms around her and I said, I can't do this anymore. And she said, okay. I said, no, wait, I really can't. I called my boss, I quit. She said, what? I said, I quit. I'm not going back out. Not gonna do it again. It was a shock to her because, like I said, I got paid very, very well for what I did. And there was no plan going forward. None. Next day, we got the notice that my father-in-law was dying of cancer. I realized that was the right decision. So we started going back to church. One of the reasons we went back to church at that time, to be completely honest, was because my father-in-law wanted to go back to church. He was nearing his end of life. And he'd been convicted, so we went back to church. And we moved back to the church that my family's always gone to out in Golden. Beautiful little church, just love it. And I was wrestling with these demons, and I was still that person. I had never come off of it, not at all. I was here in Mineola, and I was still acting like I was there. Some of you guys understand that. I've heard his word whispered 3 times in my life. Once, when I was out on the road, laying in a hotel room, and I heard go home. That was in New Mexico. The second time, my wife was working in the church. We got involved. I knew I had to get involved. I knew that I wanted to come back. I was laying in my bedroom, 4 o'clock in the morning, still quiet, and I heard go home. Heard it again. My wife was working in the church, and I stopped by to see her one day. And as she worked, I went into the sanctuary in Golden, and I heard ask. I did. Everything that I've been taught when I was young came back. Like that. That wall disappeared. It was difficult for me to deal with. Really was. But I went back to what I'd been taught, and I began to investigate it, and I began to grow as a Christian. I began to work for the church, and I began to do what I've always done, which is operations management, to become involved and to try to help. And I began to have things fall away. I began to get relief. I began to have things revealed, things that I never understood were shown to me. Five years before that, a person from this church, James Griffin, after I'd called my wife and told her that I was not coming home again, had seen her out in her yard. He stopped. He said, "You need a hug." Now, if you haven't met Brother Griffin, stopping and telling my wife she needs a hug. This fellow's about that big, about that big. He got out and he gave her a hug. He asked her to start coming to church. And he kept working on her. And her involvement in church worked on me. It began slowly at first, very slowly. When my father-in-law passed, we became even more involved. We didn't stop going. And I went back to trying to build a business, something I knew. When I told you that I wasn't very good at sports, I joined the rifle team. I won the state championship in Louisiana in 1984 and 85 in small bore and long range shooting. I was a Bianchi Cup competitor, and I followed the Olympic path. Very good at what I did. I can tell you that when I traveled, I was always protected. I had to be. Always. I was never without my guns. It was something that I'd grown used to, so I decided that's the path that I wanted to follow here, and I am. It's something that I know and that I teach, and I would never abdicate for violence, but I would always advocate for protection, taking care of yourself and your family. And to be quite honest with you, I've seen what's on the other side. That's why I do it. I'm still the guy that sits in the back of the room where I can see the doors. Always will be. I'm still the guy that is never without. Until last year, I had a gun in the bathroom. That guy. My girls, thank God, laugh at me. I thank the Lord for this. We went to New Mexico, and I told them when we went to New Mexico, they wanted to go see museums, and I told them we can't go there. And they said, why? And I said, well, we can go to the one on this side of the tracks, can't go to the one on that side. I said, why? When we were pulling off the interstate, I saw the tags on the gas pumps, and I knew that the area south was not a good area, not safe. They didn't see that, they didn't know that. I do, I see it. I still see it. They thought that was the funniest thing in the world, and they put on their jerseys because we were gonna go see a football game with my family afterwards, watch TV, and I told them to take their jerseys off. They didn't know. They didn't know. Thank God. So I've become that person. God has worked on me, and He has blessed me in ways I can't even describe. Once I became the person who asked, those teachings came back. Everything that my grandmother had worked on me came back. I began to grow and develop. Found Pastor Boyd, thank God. And things got a little easier. Like I said, those walls started coming down. I've gone from being the guy that didn't care to the one that cares too much. True. Don't want to see anybody hurt. I want to take care of people. I want to minister to people. I want to teach. I told you I'd get back to the adoption thing later. Here's the point of the whole thing. Last year for Christmas, I've always wondered, never knew anything. My girls gave me one of those DNA kits. And the phone calls were made. And I got to sit down and talk to Mom. My father was deceased. He was the fellow that designed the fuel system for the Space Shuttle Challenger, unfortunately, and the F-16. A very intelligent man. My mother, back in the 60s, had way too much fun when she's a kid and I was conceived. And when she went home to talk to her parents, her stepmother had told her that we'll raise the kid, but once he's born, you gotta go. You can't be here. And so in order to keep that from happening, she put me up for adoption. And over the course of the last year, it has become apparent to me that God has been protecting me and taking care of me the whole time. He's been showing me what he wanted me to see. You often get off, ask what your favorite Bible verse is. Mine is, it's right there. A man's heart plans his course, but the Lord determines his steps. Over the course of about 50 years. I'm happy to be here. I'm excited to be here. I want to be a teacher. I want to spread what I've learned. I want to minister. That's it. That's where we are. Please take the opportunity to ask. Don't ask. It won't happen. So there you go. Hope you know me a little bit better. Understand where I'm coming from. God bless.
So Mike, you said it was Christian Science, you're talking Scientology?
No, sir, I'm not. I'm talking about Christian Science. Exactly, Christian Science. Christian Science reading rooms may be familiar to you. They are very scripturally analytical.
They're just not familiar with the background of it. So how do they interpret Jesus?
Sir, they interpret Jesus as the Son of God. They believe that Christ is the Son of God, but they do not believe that Christ exists in this world other than God's presence, if that makes any sense. This is Satan's domain, according to them. The earth is Satan's domain. Now, he can come in and out. I was asked this question the other day. Can God be in the presence of sin? Yeah, he sure can. He can get wherever he wants to. That may not be a popular statement, but it's true. If not, how's he going to judge you? Think about it. So yes, they believe that Christ is the ascended Son of God. But this is Satan's lair. This is where he was cast.
Well, I often wondered what you did. You took away stand-up comedian right away.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Sorry if this is a little bit of a depressing testimony, but the point of the whole thing is very simple.
Right.
Why Mineola? How'd you get to Mineola?
Sir, my family's been here since 1860.
1860.
Yes, sir.
You weren't around then, were you?
No, sir. No, sir. No.
he was in Fort Worth back then.
My mother's family is from the Golden and
What was your first contact with Mineola as an adult?
my first contact with Mineola was in 1977, the first time we were allowed to come up here and stay with my grandparents over the summer.
And so, as an adult, when did you form a home in Mineola?
We've been here for 27 years. 27 years, so that would, I guess backing it up, it would be 1996, sir.
So you were working for that other company while you lived here?
Yes,
This was your home base?
this was my wife's home base, sir. I had a home here, but I didn't ever come here. Every once in a while. Every once in a while, I stayed on the road. Anyway, Pastor Boyd, you want to close us with prayer? If anyone else has any questions.
Yeah,
And you could have run 15, 20 minutes later. We wouldn't have got up and left that.
That's okay.
That testimony is awesome.
Thank you.
And don't ever be afraid to share that with women in the room.
I have to be very guarded about what I say.
Well,
Because I don't
do
get it.
that very tactfully.
Thank you. Thank you. There's an additional concern with that because some of the people I hacked off still look for me. So I'm very careful about what I do say.
Well, yeah, I mean,
And so, I still live that life, I still live that awareness life, so yeah, it's tough to talk about things like that for me. And I apologize if I got a little messy, but,
You're still doing the gun
Sir?
training? You're still doing gun training and such?
I am, that's what I do every day for a living. I am one of those people that, it makes sense to me, and so, I've paired up with some people that, makes sense to them, and that's what I do. I'm that guy. I will not, I'm not the guy that has a gun store and goes, hey, yeah, it's great, it's in a magazine. We're the type of people that train you to use it.
there's the Lord and pass the ammunition.
Like I said, without going too far in that direction, but yeah, it's always made sense to me, and it always will. So that's what I do for a living. Got to get paid some way, right? There you go.
Thanks a lot, Mike.
Thanks.
Nature Joe has it next week.
Okay. Does he know?
He knows it now.
Okay.
November 19th. What's her name?
All right, good to see you. Pastor, you mind closing with prayer?
Sir?
You mind closing this with prayer?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You good?
Get Bob Gray.
It's cold this morning. There we go. Let's bow our heads. Gracious God, Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for the opportunity to gather and fellowship, to hear some word, Lord, to hear what your grace is doing in all of our lives. Lord, we thank you that, Lord, you have adopted us right into your kingdom. Lord, even though we don't always do the right thing, Lord, your love prevails. Prevail with us today.
Yeah.
Go with us throughout our day. Bless our conversation, bless our thoughts, bless our actions. We ask these things in your Son, Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Yeah. By you blessed.